Bank of Canada announcement day. Unfortunately, today the Bank of Canada noted that there is going to be no change in the overnight rate. If you have a fixed rate mortgage, this information does not impact your mortgage. If you have a variable rate mortgage, this would impact your mortgage. If they made changes, unfortunately, they've left everything as is. So our overnight rate remains at 2.75%, which means the prime rate on your mortgage is 4.95%. If you're with TD Canada Trust, you are 15 basis points higher than everybody else. That's just the way that they structure their financing. Now let's talk a little bit about why the rate was held, and then we'll get into the details as to where we're at economically, what the expectations are for the remainder of 2025, and a little bit about the housing market and opportunities that exist. So the Bank of Canada today told us that they're holding that overnight rate specifically because our first quarter in Canada was a little bit stronger than what was expected. That's a little bit deceiving. If you've been watching the news recently, you've probably seen that Canada's not doing very well, or at least the sentiment is that we are not doing very well. You have to keep in mind that the first quarter here in Canada, we were able to get an indication that the tariffs were coming from Trump, and a lot of businesses, both in the United States as well in Canada, were able to front run those tariffs by exporting or importing a lot of goods in order to avoid the tariffs specifically. That spurred the growth a little bit faster than what was expected, as companies were making those investments at that point in time in order to save themselves some money and be able to get those goods and services exported prior to the tariffs. That has now come to an end, and you are starting to see the impact of tariffs on the Canadian economy. It hasn't quite shown up in the numbers yet, but it certainly is coming. We're seeing unemployment tick up, and that will likely get worse here in Canada within the next couple of months. Again, the steel and aluminum tariffs just went in today from Trump, an additional 25%. So we're now up to 50%. That is absolutely crippling for that industry here in Canada. And steel and aluminum aren't light enough to ship anywhere else realistically. So not a good thing. What the expectation is moving forward is that we're going to continue to see the Canadian economy buckle. We have to see what the Carney government is going to do in order to support the Canadian economy. They haven't tabled the budget yet. He does have a plan based on his election platform. He hasn't had a whole lot of time to let us know exactly what that's going to look like. So we have to wait and see as to what the government is going to help do to support Canadians. In conjunction with that, the Bank of Canada is also going to have to pay attention to the numbers. What the expectations are as far as interest rates is that we're probably going to see at least 50 basis points more of interest rate cuts this year. I expect that we could see the first cut as early as July as we start to continue down that path. The numbers as far as the Canadian economy are going to dictate what the Bank of Canada does moving forward. So if you have a variable rate mortgage, you still have great discounting, prime minus 75 to prime minus 1. Probably good to remain in that at this point in time. If you're very nervous about your interest rate, the economy as a whole, locking that mortgage into a rate sub 4%, if you could still find one, could be an option for you. Renewals. Mortgage renewals are incredible in Canada at the moment. There's 1.25 million mortgage renewals in Canada between 2025 and 2026. The banks are hyper aware of this, and as you've probably heard, the Canadian housing market pretty slow at the moment, which means there's less business for the banks. They're very hungry to retain your existing business. Our clients have been able to get rates as low as 3.75% recently on some of their mortgage renewals with their financial institutions. It does take negotiating. Keep in mind, your bank does not want you to pay as little interest as possible. They want you to pay as much as possible. So it does take a little bit of back and forth. If you need help with your mortgage renewal, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you negotiate that. What we're finding is about 80% of our clients are able to stay with their existing lender. There's no real process that's tied to it. From an application perspective, it can be quite easy. You can get great pricing. It does take some management though. Let's talk a little bit about the housing market. So the housing market, if you've seen anything in the news recently, it is complete doom and gloom. It's not as actually bad as the media makes it out to be. The condo markets in Ontario as well as Vancouver in certain pockets are struggling, but our end user product, townhomes, single family homes, depending upon the area or location, still faring quite well. Yes, there's been a decline in overall prices, but it hasn't been significant at this point in time. What is really lacking is the consumer sentiment. So with all of the news and media that is out there at the moment, what that's telling majority of Canadians is, man, maybe I should wait and see what's going to happen here. However, we are seeing some fantastic deals in the market for our clients. There are still properties that are desirable properties that are priced well, that are selling in multiple offers. I know that sounds crazy, but we are seeing it on a regular basis in the office at the moment. So if you're looking at selling and buying, maybe getting into something slightly larger, this could be a good opportunity with the slump in prices. Interest rates, despite being in the 4% range, that is historically still a very competitive rate range. If you look at the last 20 years worth of interest rates, yes, housing prices are higher today than they were 20 years ago. But, if we can have interest rates that are somewhere in the 4% range historically, you are doing very well. Again, I'm Tyler from Pilot. If you have any questions, you need help with your mortgage, please give me a shout. This is your update for the Bank of Canada as of June this year. Talk to you soon.